breaking news in the SportsCenter's promise, courtesy of the NBA. Sources telling Adrian Wojnarowski that the Nets are bringing back Kyrie as a part-time player for games outside of New York. Now, if you remember, since training camp, he's refused to satisfy New York City vaccine mandates in order to play home games, leading the Nets to sideline him for all games so far this season. But with injuries and players entering COVID protocols, repeatedly leaving the roster shorthanded as of late, Brooklyn decided to change course. Now, if he were to start playing games for the Nets, here's what the upcoming schedule looks like. They play their next 3 at home, so no Kyrie there for sure. Then they go to Portland, which is where he could make his season debut. Then they got the Lakers on Christmas and then Clippers 2 days later. For more information and reaction, here's Mike Greenberg and tonight's NBA Countdown crew.
All right, Michael, thank you very much. To be exact, they have 27 road games left, so we'll see how many of those he is able to play. Big Perk is in for Stephen A tonight. Steve's a little bit under the weather. It is not COVID-related. Michael Wilbon, Jalen Rose. That is the overwhelming news. The Nets bringing Kyrie Irving back as a part-time player. It is Woj who has that story and has all the information, so let's waste no time and get right to him. Woj, take us into this decision and what it means for the Nets and I guess for the entire NBA.
Yeah, Greeny, Kyrie Irving, since the preseason when the Nets sidelined him because they did not want him as a part-time player, did not want him just for road games, has wanted to play this role, to play road games, not get vaccinated. And finally the Nets in really over the last week to 10 days, as they've lost players in COVID. They've got 7 players in protocols. And the load on Kevin Durant, 37 minutes a game, the most he's played in the league since his MVP season in 2013-14. Listen, the Nets see a window here, a tight window to win a championship. And to them, the circumstances have changed. They've got a roster and key players in Durant and James Harden who welcome back Kyrie Irving, even in this role. And, their head coach, Steve Nash, Sean Marks, their GM, and their owner, Joe Tsai, their thinking evolved on this and ultimately saw a player who can help carry the load for them in the regular season. He can practice at home and play road games. They'll get to the postseason when they do and figure out how that might work. But right now in Brooklyn, they want to win a championship. And the load on their roster with, again, players out with COVID, the minutes that Kevin Durant has had to play and James Harden, who's out in COVID now, they decided, really to start having that conversation with Kyrie Irving. And now he's going to have to test for 5 successive days negative. Then he can rejoin the team. And then it's a ramp up, Greeny, to when he's ready to return on the road. Remember, he can't play against the Knicks at Madison Square Garden, and he can't play in Toronto against the Raptors. He can play everywhere else in the NBA.
Exactly. So that's how we actually get from 27 road games to 24 that under the current policies he would be eligible to play. All right, Woj, stay close by. You'll be right off of the top of Countdown tonight, and we'll get in depth into a lot of this. But let me bring that to the group here, and let's just try and make some semblance of. I mean, Jalen Rose, you and I have known each other 15 years. I thought we'd seen everything. And now here we go. Kyrie Irving is going to come back and play road games. What?
It's a win-win for the Nets. Here's why. Because you mentioned they're being shorthanded, right? So maybe if you get Kyrie back playing road games, maybe he considers getting vaccinated, realizing that they have a legitimate chance to win the championship this year. And I know a lot of people who are cheerleading people that are non-vaccinated are going to look at this as a heroic act. It's not. Okay, he was actually still getting paid his salary from the NBA, still getting paid his salary from his shoe company. I just saw him the other day drop an ad for his shoe with compression pants, and I said he's coming back.
Yes,
and so I'm not surprised that he's going to be in uniform. Let's see if he now ultimately gets vaccinated and plays home games as well.
Let me ask a Big Perk, can this work? I mean, can you have a player who only plays basically half the games in the modern NBA? Can that work?
Yes, it can. When you're dealing with a player like Kyrie Irving, here's the thing. I'd rather have a part-time Kyrie Irving than a no-time Kyrie Irving. He's just that valuable to the game. And here's the thing. He was sitting back, and you know this, Jalen, as a former player, that when you're sitting back and you're on the outside looking in and you're watching your team have success and you're watching them ball out without you and you're sitting on the sideline, and we all know at heart, Kyrie Irving is a hooper. He wants to be out there. And to take it to another level, when you see your brother Kevin Durant and what he's doing, I think that inspired Kyrie Irving and the Brooklyn Nets even more.
All right, so when I need perspective, I turn to Micah Wilbon for it.
A cynic now? All right, let me be candid. I listen to these two all the time. They know because I'll text in a minute, and Jalen knows he's going to put up with me for 20 years. And I'm listening very closely to what they're saying. And still, and I believe he's a great talent. Mm-hmm. The question is, does this ignore human nature? I mean, there's nothing like the dynamic of a locker room. They know better than I do, and I know better than anybody who hasn't played because I've been going in locker rooms for 40 years. And there are feelings in locker rooms. There are sometimes resentments. There are clear-headed star players who can look at you and say, are you kidding me? We're gonna do this? Remember, the Nets management said, we don't want him doing every other game. We can't practice. We don't know how that's going to go. And so while I'm leaning toward what these guys are saying about the talent and adding it to the court, part of me saying
sidelined Kyrie Irving when he wouldn't get vaccinated and did not want him as a part-time player. The Nets look at, certainly where they are with COVID, 7 players out in protocols. Kevin Durant at 37 minutes a game, the most he's played since 2014 when he won the MVP. And a chance now to have Kyrie Irving to help bridge them to the postseason, ease the minutes load on their team, get them a number 1 seed, and then see where they are in the playoffs. But they know that they have ultimately a tight window to try to win a championship. They have James Harden, potentially could head into free agency next season, as can Kyrie Irving. And they see an opportunity here to win and ultimately decided that they're going to bring Kyrie Irving back. He will start ramping up with the Nets. He can practice at home. He cannot play road games against the Knicks or the Raptors. He can play everywhere else in the NBA. But the Nets, they need him to get 5 straight negative COVID tests, and then he can return to the team. And then the Nets, who've not seen Kyrie Irving play, they don't know what kind of shape he's in. But right now, they're bringing him back. And listen, this is an organization that wants to win a title and thinks Kyrie now gives them a better chance to do that.
Well, you mentioned he can't play at the Garden. He can't play in Toronto. That means there are currently 24 games on the schedule he is eligible to play. How soon, what do we know about how soon we can expect to see him?
Well, certainly there's a road game coming up in Portland next week. I think that may be too soon. People are going to point to that Christmas Day game against the Lakers in L.A., but it's unclear. And Kyrie Irving has shown in the past he wants to be in peak condition to play. And he has shown that he wants to feel at 100%. But certainly that Christmas Day game is certainly a big carrot out there. Right now, it's unclear. They've got to get him back in the gym, get him with this team, and see how long of a process that's going to be.
Yeah, they play, as you mentioned, Portland on Thursday night and then at the Lakers on Christmas. That's a week from tomorrow. We'll see if there's any chance that we see him. Woj, stay close by. Outstanding work today, obviously, on this enormous story. Let me give you some numbers here. Kyrie has not played since last season's Eastern Conference semis against Milwaukee. Since the start of last season, the Nets have played just 14 games with Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Irving all on the floor. They were 11-3 in those games. So here's what we know as we bring it out to the group here. With this team, anything short of a championship is a failure. Mm-hmm. He's coming back to play road games. Jalen, can they win a championship that way?
They can win it this season with Kyrie Irving in uniform, yes, Greeny. And he's such a dynamic player. A lot of times we're talking more about his vaccination status than actually what he brings to the floor. And I'll tell you something. You'll get Kyrie Irving's productivity. To me, you'll take pressure off of Kevin Durant, who's been really efficient. And you also get a motivated James Harden, who came to the Nets to play amongst a big three that we've only seen around 20 games that we just put up on the screen. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a good call by the Nets. You're paying him his salary anyway. I'm pretty sure he got gym shoes he needs to sell. It'd be great for us if he could come back on Christmas.
Will this work, Big Perk? He's coming back to play half the schedule, basically half the games, let's call it. Can that work?
Absolutely, it's going to work. And you know why it's going to work? It's not just because of Kyrie. I'd rather have Kyrie part-time than no time. But it's because of Kevin Wayne Durant, the best player in the world. And if you look at these past 2 games, look at what KD done. 7 or 8 guys, key guys that are in protocol. He said, you know what? Call those young bucks up from the G League and watch me put them up under my wing. Right now, the way that Kevin Durant is playing, he could carry the Nets at home without a Kyrie Irving. Hell, he could put you in one corner, you in one corner, put Jalen at the wing and have me rolling at the basket. But that's how great Kevin Durant is playing. So long as you have this KD, and then you mix up a Kyrie part-time, yes, they can win the championship.
You're selling me short. I'm money from the short corner, but that's neither here nor there. Michael Wilbon, why do I sense you're a tad more skeptical?
I don't doubt a word that my two friends and colleagues have said just now about Kyrie in that lineup on the floor again. Mm-hmm. But I wonder about this, and I'm going to defer to them because they know better than I will, but I have spent 40 years in locker rooms. They are the most fascinating places to me that I've ever been. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about all the sports. There's a dynamic, it can be delicate. It's always fascinating. You don't know what way things are gonna go. People have feelings. There's sometimes resentment, there's great support, there's admiration, and you don't know where it's coming from and what the mix is. And I'm wondering from you guys, is there something here, given your life in locker rooms, where you go, well, I'm giving pause a little bit?
Well, giving pause a little bit because I want to give respect to the opponent. Like, I want to give respect to the Bucks. I want to give respect to the Heat. Like, to have a part-time player. But here's the other thing. If he don't play this year, Greeny, those relationships ain't the same.
Right.
Like, today they feel like the same, but when you get eliminated from the playoffs in the second round, the relationships change.
I think someone needs to be the voice of skepticism here. I mean, there was a time in the NBA where some players only played home games. That time was 70 years ago because in those days they could make more money in other jobs. This is unprecedented. A guy to just play the road games, just to play half the games. One night you have him, one night you don't. You got to figure out one offense with him, one offense without him.
Elgin Baylor, by the way, was in the reserves, and he played like half a season one year. But Perk, you've been in some fascinating locker rooms where people, obviously there was a chemistry that was so prevailing. You knew you could win. Are you worried about that dynamic?